Hello guys, my name is Paige. I'm moderating today's fireside chat, and we have on stage with us Nicole McLaughlin. You might know her because she has an impressive social media presence, and she has very unique, eye-catching design work. If it's okay with you, I'd love to start by asking you to introduce yourself and maybe tell us how you would describe what you do.
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Nicole McLaughlin and I'm a designer based in Brooklyn, so close by, and I'm an upcycling designer, so I take old and used things and I try to find new and fun ways to use the materials and rework them to keep the lifespan going.
That's really cool. I know, like you said, you kind of work with repurposing waste, and we think of waste, it encompasses like many things. The category is really broad, but it's also at the same time vague. I feel like we don't really think about what we do and we kind of throw our waste away, like what happens to it. So I'm curious, like what kind of notion you think we have of waste and how you've kind of reformatted that for yourself and what you want other people to think about waste.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we are so easy to just get rid of things, and it's kind of programmed into us. And I think there was a time where I felt something kind of switch, where I was like, you become more aware of the stuff that you're using and the single-use items that are just so embedded in our life. And at some point I was like, maybe I could be doing more, maybe I could be using this longer. And for me, that really started just as a design exploration, just taking a look in my closet and being like, there's so many great things in here that I'm not wearing, and why am I not wearing them? Can I take them out, reassess why I don't want them anymore, and try to find another way to use them again? But I feel like just waste in general is, we're so surrounded by it that we almost like block it out. And I kind of noticed that being in New York sometimes, like, this is a kind of a hub for that, and we really need to be more conscious of the things in our lives and also be able to like want to try to use it more. So I guess that's kind of what my perspective is on it. I just think it's a tool, and I just think we're not using it.
Did that come naturally to you, like looking at something in a context that we're not used to seeing it and like rethinking that?
So I guess I'll give a little bit more of my backstory on that, but I was working in the fashion industry, and that was really the time that I saw the most amount of waste. And I think that was a look behind the curtain where I was like, oh wow, like as a consumer, you don't really get the opportunity to see just how much is being produced, and when you go to the factories to see how many like scraps and things are just around. And that really just kind of opened my eyes quite a bit. And simultaneously, I started just starting to see things and like see myself using things and then, so easily just throwing it away. And I think it would just kind of all click for me, where I was like, there's so much potential with the stuff that I have. And after working in this office that had amazing samples and shoes and things that were just getting so easily trashed, I was like, we need to be finding a way to use this. And that's actually really when I started to do my own design practice from that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm also curious about how you kind of got there. I know that you studied speech pathology and that you kind of pivoted into design, and I feel like those two are very contrasting. And I imagine that like a lot of us here are concerned about choosing your right path in college. So I'm curious like what that shift was like and if that influenced your work right now.
100%. I actually in high school, well, I was not a good student. I struggled really, really hard in school while I was growing up. And it wasn't until I got to high school, I met somebody that was deaf, and I was really interested in sign language. And so I was doing so bad in school, but I decided outside of school on my free time, I would teach myself how to speak sign language. And so I would go on like websites and read books and try to just kind of immerse myself into groups of people that were speaking the language. And I just thought it was so interesting. I loved that it was a visual language. I think for me, I started to realize like, okay, I think I gravitate more towards that. Like if I could pick up a language that was so visual, but I'm, failing at math class, like something's going on here. And so I decided I wanted to pursue that. But also in the meantime, I was making videos and just trying to edit clips of me like teaching myself sign language and trying to help like my friends and other people get involved in the language. And so the university that I picked, I went to East Stroudsburg University in Pennsylvania, so not too far away from here. I picked that school because they had a speech-language pathology program. And I got there, and I was like, as many, I think, of us feel, like you get to school and you're like, oh, maybe that's not exactly what I wanted to do. So I kind of reset while I was in school. I was taking some photography and videography classes because I was still so interested in making those videos of me signing. And so that was really the moment where I was like, okay, I think I enjoy sign language as like a means to express myself. I like that it's visual. I actually like making the videos more than I like, maybe pursuing a career in speech language pathology. So that's really when I was like, okay, I think I need to go more of this creative route. And I graduated, my degree was in digital media communications, so I did more of visual art type things. And then thankfully I was able to get an internship working for Reebok, and so that's where I was. That's where I started to work in the fashion industry and started to see kind of the way things were going.
Yeah, speaking of Reebok, I mean, a lot of us think of working in a big company as like a sense of security, I guess. Not just like socially, but also financially for sure. And you left that first job out of college to go into freelance. I'm curious if you were like scared, like did you talk to your friends and family about making that decision?
Yeah, my parents were really scared. I was scared, but I think I was more just like excited. I can talk a little bit about like why I decided to go freelance. So when I was working at Reebok, I was doing graphic design, and so that was my job. I never did like footwear or apparel, but I was really curious about it. I think just being around that type of product, I was like, how is this made? My background is not fashion design, but I was more just like, what if I tried to make these things myself? And taking the samples, taking the used things that were in the office and trying to break it down and start over again. I don't think we realize like how much stuff sits in some of these big corporate offices, whether that's like old papers or swatches or samples, like especially with footwear, which I thought was so interesting. So like a sneaker that we all know and love, it could take like 4 or 5 rounds of samples to get to that final product. And when I say sample, it's like a half a pair. Chances are there's not another matched pair to it, so there's not really much you could do with it. It's not something you could donate. It just kind of ends up getting sent back and shredded and burned. So that's where I was like, okay, let me just try to make something out of this. Let's see if I could use this for something. And I did, and I just was like, this is so cool. I was making these projects and posting them on social media, and I was kind of moonlighting as this other designer. I was like, my day job was strictly graphic designer, and then on the weekends and at night, I was having so much fun just making all these things. And at some point I was like, okay, I think I need to pursue this. Like, I feel like there's something here. And if this is just one sector of the industry, one brand in the industry, how many other brands have this much stuff? And not just within the fashion industry, but other industries as well. So I left corporate. I was there maybe a couple years, like 4 years, and that was like my job after school. So I did not ever see myself being a freelancer. I was definitely not prepared for like what that actually meant. And my parents were like, well, you're gonna leave your health insurance and your 401k. And I was like, it's gonna be all right, we're gonna figure it out. And I did, and I'm so thankful that I did. I've definitely learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about business. I think it was really helpful for me to have worked in that environment to understand how all the chains of operation kind of work together, whether that is through design, development, marketing, even just like, finance, all these things. It's being able to pay attention. And then if you want to go off and do freelance, being able to apply that to yourself.
Yeah, you spoke on it a bit, but did you kind of understand what you were stepping into when you made that full transition? Like, for example, how did you value yourself and like your own work? How do you decide how to put like a number to it? Because that is eventually what happens. Did that kind of change as you became more, I guess, professional and worked as a freelancer for longer?
Yeah, it is. It's really difficult to be able to make that leap and know what you're worth, to value your art and design can be very subjective at times. And I mean, I didn't really know, and I was looking towards people that had more experience and kind of just talking and going to events and going to things where I could hopefully meet people and learn from those around me. I left Boston to move to New York when I went freelance, and that was maybe like 4 or 5 months before COVID happened. So that was also a really crazy time where it was like I just quit my job and I was like, oh, I'm gonna kill it, and then I moved to New York and then everything shut down. So I was like, oh man, I can't do all the networking and all the things that I would necessarily want to do. So I really was using social media as a tool. I'd say it has been such an advantage to have that. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have that to be successful, but if you're able to use it to be able to just connect with people, you don't have to have like a huge platform to be able to share your work. But I definitely was using it as a tool and trying to just understand what it is and like how I could make money, because my goal with upcycling and my goal with design was never to make a brand. It was never supposed to be a scalable thing. It was always like the feeling of me making concepts in my room, like I wanted to just be able to do that for a living. And so that's what I really set out to do. And so I am now, that's really my job, is to work with brands to be able to help them to figure out, okay, you have all this excess material, what can we do with it? You know, can I give you suggestions? Can we make things together? Can we raffle it off for charity? Like those are all kind of avenues of what I do. And then now I actually get to do workshops as well, which is super exciting because I get to teach people how to be able to make these things. And so that's really been the craziest time, has been learning how to structure a business and then also how to be able to like make money from it and ask for what you think you deserve, which is more than you think. That's kind of really what I've realized. You know, you value yourself probably a lot lower than other people do.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to individual projects, then did your approach and your thought process change too, compared to like when you were working in a company versus like doing this on your own with other companies?
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, I think the question, especially within the sector of the fashion industry that I'm in with sustainability, more specifically upcycling, is how do you scale this? I think that's what everyone is kind of like, you know, you can make one-off pieces all day, but what happens when you want to actually apply this at a larger scale? And so that's really been kind of more the interesting approach, is like learning from these brands and realizing like where we can improve. So I'd say like a good example would be when I come to work with a brand, I'll try to figure out, okay, what it is that you have, what you're trying to achieve, taking responsibility for the stuff that you've made, which I think a lot of brands don't do. They've made, you know, so much stuff. A lot of these brands have been around for so long, and their stuff is just, you know, once they sell it to you, it's your problem. And so we're having an entire influx of stuff in thrift stores and people just throwing clothes away, and it's kind of like, okay, what if we had an opportunity to do a take back program where it's like you made this material, it's kind of your mess, let's help clean it up, and you know that material better than anybody else, so you can take that shoe back and break it down and be able to try to find a way to use it again. And so I guess that's more of like what I've been really focusing on, and that's not exactly what I thought I would be doing as a freelancer, but I think it's been so interesting just to learn from all these brands and be able to apply it to my own design aesthetic. So most of my income and what I do for a living is helping these brands, but I still want to be able to have all that personal work where I get to have fun and I make, you know, cool projects that I'm proud of, and then also, you know, explore things beyond just the world of like shoes or clothes. I'm trying to do furniture and stuff, so making the connections within these companies to be able to fund my personal projects.
Mm-hmm. Was there a personal project that was like particularly memorable to you, or that maybe changed your perspective?
Yeah, I always will say it was pretty early on. I made a slipper out of a volleyball, and I think it was just like the first time that I saw something that was like so outside of the world of what a shoe is supposed to be, and how easily it was to just like take out some of the stitches and start to fold it and mold it to my foot. And it made a comfortable shoe because of the material. It was colorful. It was exciting to look at. And I think that was really like one of those moments where it's like, I think I have something here. Like that was almost like too easy to be able to do that. And why aren't more people doing that?
Yeah, I can imagine that was very eye-opening. Kind of based on that, I know a lot of the things you make, you think a lot about functionality. Like it's not just like putting things together, you focus on how can this become something that you use. And a lot of the materials that you make these things out of are very familiar to us, like the brands or the colors. Do you feel like that's maybe why people gravitate towards your work? Like, do you feel like there's an aspect of recognizability? I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's super intentional, and I always want to be able to make things that people feel like they could resonate with, or something that they even might have at home. And I kind of feel like it goes back to what I was talking about before with sign language, is like it's a visual language. And so what I'm trying to create is I want us to be able to look at something and like what it is right away. And like we don't have to be speaking the same language for you to have some type of recognition with it. So I've used a lot of sporting goods. I've used like beanies, Carhartt beanies, brands that I think kind of translate through many different countries, and people have experienced that product in some way. And it's so fun to take something that is it's really has to have one use, and like to be able to take it out of that context is always really exciting. I think a memorable one for me would be the carrot peeler heel that I've done, because like why would you ever want to take like a kitchen item and make a high heel out of it? And of course it's not like seen as the most functional thing, but it did work surprisingly, and it was kind of like if I had an old carrot peeler, like why not try to put it in that context? So it's more of a conversation starter, I'd say. And it's actually my approach to getting people to talk about sustainability. It is very intentional because I want to start a conversation. And a lot of the time in the world of sustainability in the fashion industry, it's not the most like fun topic to talk about. It's very dark. It can get to be really overwhelming for a lot of us that are feeling like we're bearing the weight of these large corporations. And so to be able to, make something that is inspiring, but also it can talk about a larger subject in a more fun and lighthearted way, that's really like the best possible thing that could happen with my work. That's really like the goal with it, is like maybe you don't like it, but you could talk about it and people will comment on it and say they hate it or they say they love it, and I'm like, you know what, they're talking about it, so that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. You're definitely starting conversations. And a lot of the brands that we see in your work, like you've actually worked with them, like very big brands like Nike, Hermès, HBO, eBay. You're also the ambassador, the first one for Arc'teryx. How did you navigate that as a freelancer? Like, how did you achieve so much?
I mean, I just feel super grateful, but I really started from those personal projects. So like these brands were not paying me to be making those projects. Like I was doing all these, things just because I wanted to, and thankfully they started to see and they started to recognize. And a lot of the time people are like, oh, aren't you worried they're just going to rip you off? And I was like, well, that could very well happen, and that does happen in this industry. But I was really persistent, and I think a lot of them started to realize they can't replicate it, so they want to be able to learn. And that was more about it. It was like because it had a deeper meaning than just like, oh, it's just a fun project. They were more curious about like, oh, well, how did you do that? And like, we have that material. Like, do you think you could show us how to do that? So that's been really exciting and super inspiring, and especially being able to work with like an Hermès, where it's a lot of the time people don't ever get to see that side of it. They only see the perfect bag that comes out in the store, and the stuff that they sent me to work with was like damaged goods. And I was like, you know what, this is still pretty good stuff. And I was almost like really hesitant to start like cutting at it and remaking it. So I didn't. And I was like, you can still upcycle something and make it interesting again without feeling like you need to like completely hack it apart and start over again. And then other times, I mean, I have like the worst term for myself, but I call myself the industry dumpster, because I feel like these brands just are like, oh, this is just garbage, so we'll send it to Nicole now. So, but for me, it's kind of a thrill because I get to look through it and I get to decide like, oh, if it has holes or it has stains, like how do I work around that? How do I incorporate that, you know? And it's also the same mindset when I go thrifting as well, where it's like, what's the most that I could get out of one piece? So I'll start by actually looking for myself, for my personal wardrobe. I'm like, okay, I'll wear that for a while, and then once I'm done wearing it, then I'll turn it into a project. But I want to be able to find a jacket that has zippers, that has, you know, toggles on it, that has a hood, all things that I could use for different projects. So I don't know what the question was, and I don't know where I was going, but...
Well, thrifting is definitely a skill, and I feel like you'd be very good at it.
I love it. It's so much fun. And it is really cool to be able, if that is like your entry point into sustainability, I think it's a great one. There's so much stuff. And it's cool to be able to try to, if you thrift something and it doesn't fit you the way you want it to, or you want it to be a little bit different, to feel like you can alter it to make it your style, I think is really inspiring.
Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff, but we do want to ask maybe what some of your biggest obstacles have been, some challenges that you feel like either they can be things that you've kind of moved forward from or that you still kind of struggle with right now.
I mean, I definitely think a lot of it for me was mental in the beginning. It still is. It really depends on the day for me. I can sometimes be a little bit too harsh on myself, and I definitely struggled especially while I was at Reebok, with this feeling of imposter syndrome, because my background really wasn't design, and then I ended up in a design career, and I was constantly being like, I'm not good enough for this. And even especially once I went freelance, I was like, I'm really in over my head. And so I had to always kind of remind myself, like, you know, I'm meant to be here. Like, I'm passionate about what I do, and I want people to be able to see that, and I want them to be able to give me a chance. And so that was really, I think, the challenging part that I still face. I mean, I also struggle a lot with mental health when it comes to social media. I think we all have experienced that in some way or another, and that's a big part of my job, is being very public about my work and kind of showing all the projects, whether I'm like, you know, if I don't think it's 100% or completely done and a brand's like, nope, it has to go out today, like those are all the things as designers we're like, what could it have been type of thing. And so that's been definitely interesting for me to be able to navigate that, and I'm still working on that. I think I always sort of will be. And then also kind of the balance between working with brands and maintaining that personal work. Like I was saying, like the personal projects are so important because that really is the truest form of yourself, and they inspire the brand work. They get me the brand work. And so to be able to still carve out time to be able to make those things is so, so important to me. And a lot of the time, my time now is really, really dedicated to working with these partners, and so it's just more on me to be able to schedule that and make sure that it's a priority.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did see that you're having some very exciting projects coming up. Is there something that you want to achieve, like beyond sustainability, any vision that you have?
Yeah, I mean, well, I have a couple like personal goals, I guess, but it is still more revolving around sustainability, but in different ways. Education has become so important to me, and doing things like this where I can connect with students, young people. I've taught workshops with Cooper Hewitt, like really just trying to connect with like the younger generation of designers and try to help them as much as I possibly can. And to be able to give them the tools. So that was something I've noticed a lot with the stuff that I've been given to by these brands. I mean, this is all great stuff, but I'm only one person. So can I make this a larger thing? Can I connect students who, you know, it's really expensive to be a design student. It's expensive to be a fashion student in New York. And I was starting to realize like a lot of the students are out there trying to make money just so they can like buy the materials they need for their school projects. And I was like, all these Nikes trying to send me all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, we need to connect the dots here. And so that's more of where I see the future going. I would love to do some type of museum for children that can come in and be interactive and to make stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think that's important. And I'm a rock climber. I love climbing. I think it's been super helpful for me mentally. It's problem solving and exercising all at once. So future goals for that would just be like take more trips outside, get outside. The more that I'm in nature, the more I want to protect it. So it all kind of weaves together in a way.
Yeah, given that you want to inspire like other students and maybe help provide resources for them, is there any advice you would maybe tell someone who is looking to channel like a similar mindset as you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time designers feel like they need to have everything in order or like perfect to be able to make something great. And they need to have all the skill sets and all the tools and the machines or whatever it is that you're trying to make. You need to have all of it before you can actually make something. And I just feel like that can get in the way. I think that mindset really can hinder you from wanting to try things and to explore things. And some of my favorite moments as a designer were those really early days where I was just taping and gluing things together in my apartment with absolutely no clue what I was doing. And those are the moments I look back on and I was like, I was actually like really onto something, and I was persistent, and I wanted to, try to just figure this out no matter how I did it. And over time I got better, and I learned how to use the machines. I learned how to use the programs. So I always just say like, go for it, try it. And then if you're interested in upcycling, you don't always have to take it to this extreme. You don't have to start like, going through your kitchen and start making high heels out of it. But I'd say start in your closet. Start by looking at the stuff that you have before you throw, recycling away. Like look at that egg carton and be like, oh, could I make something out of this? Can I repurpose it? There's so much more that we could be doing. I feel like there's just so much potential of the things that we have in our lives, and I think it's just switching that part on in your brain and kind of keeping an eye out for the potential of the stuff that you have.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping to maybe open it up to any questions that attendees might have. I think there is a mic over there.
Any questions?
Yes, we can start with you.
Should I just project?
Um,
I can just say my question.
I can hear you, but
Yes,
if they
you
need
can
it
do
on a
that.
microphone, then that's
Cool.
okay. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you think about the role of the craftsman in this day and age, because I think you really exemplify that in the work that you're doing. And you're in your apartment or where you're living right now, and working with these materials and learning these new skills and developing expertise. But I think that a lot of folks who are craftspeople, especially those who work with traditional materials, are slowly being pushed out by automation, or in the case of probably the fashion industry, there's many programs, or even now like 3D modeling, people are building things through 3D modeling and all this sort of work, printing. And so I'm just curious, as your career moves forward and also the fashion industry moves forward, do you think that craftspeople will just slowly start to die out, or will there be a new role for them in the coming decades?
That's a really great question. Craftspeople and what we're doing as like people who are very hands-on. It has died out a lot. For some reason, I feel like I've seen more of a resurgence during COVID. Like a lot of younger people wanting to try to learn how to sew, how to make things by hand. And I always get a lot of hope when I see that, because I'm like, it's such a good skill to have, whether that's like really what you want to pursue or not pursue. But it is, the future is technology. We're in a really an amazing time for technology, but also for people that do work with their hands and people who value, that feeling of working with a textile. Like those are things that are slowly starting to go away. But I don't think it'll ever kind of lose. I think it'll always be there in some way. And I think people are starting to learn how to adapt. I'm personally, I'm not super interested in the world of digital clothes, but I'm starting to be able to understand okay, if this was to be made digitally, what would that look like? It could be more inclusive, body inclusive. You could be able to try to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in a physical world. So I do kind of think there's something that's interesting about that. But I think it is really like supporting the local shops, supporting your tailors. Like even though I know how to do it, sometimes I'll go over and still get my pants hemmed by like my local tailor. Just really supporting the communities that are involved in that, and really getting involved in the skills. I mean, I think that's kind of how it will continue to live on, is if you show an interest in wanting to actually make something by hand. I don't think it'll ever really die out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so the average American wears like a t-shirt something like 7 times before they throw it away, which I really think puts in perspective sort of a larger wasteful culture that we exist in. How do you envision your work not only inspiring brands to be more sustainable with their choices, but also changing sort of personal, social, and cultural dynamics around sustainability?
Do you want him to say it in the microphone?
Yeah, maybe for the
Okay. I think because they're trying to get it on the recording so we can hear.
For sure, I completely understand that. So I wanted to say that the average American wears like a t-shirt something like 7.5 times before they throw it out, which I think really puts in like sort of broader perspective the wasteful culture that we exist in. So how do you envision your work not only existing in the brand level and changing the way that brands interact with wastefulness and their extra resources, but also changing the social, cultural, and personal dynamics of how we envision our waste and our clothes?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, yes, I'm doing a lot of work with these brands at a brand level to help them kind of re-envision what the future is going to look like. But at the end of the day, like, I'm a consumer as well, and I'm just really trying to connect with the people around me and like my friends and people who, you know, have things that they're like, I don't know what to do with this anymore, and trying to make it feel a lot more approachable. And also like that statistic about t-shirts, like, it is so true. I mean, we're so willing to just throw something away because, like, you know, it changed color a little bit in the wash or it shrunk just a little bit. And just give suggestions and give, you know, the tools necessary to be able to use those types of things. And also really encouraging people to buy and support brands that are making good product. You know, it's kind of hard because I feel like I ride this line of like, I want people to be able to buy quality product, but not everyone can afford that. So like, how can we as consumers purchase something that's going to be able to last us a long time? And so working with brands that actually are sitting more in a fast fashion space to be like, you know, you're making affordable product, but like at the expense of whom, you know, who's behind the scenes. But like, we need to be able to make product that is affordable, is accessible, without sacrificing the quality, and like, what's the balance there? So really, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm completely answering your question, but it is really going back to just like connecting with my community and those around me and trying to help them as much as I can, just give solutions for these things. I hope that answered that.
Yes.
That was helpful.
Okay, so I want to like preface with the fact that I love your work, and
Thank you.
I've like followed for forever. And like my little fashion student brain is like fangirling right now. But I think like what I find interesting about your work specifically is like the artistic element and how like it serves as commentary in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to say like, oh, this is a super crazy, wacky way to do sustainability. Everybody can do it. Like the big corporations can do it as well. And just like understanding that there's like a place for play and fun things in that area. And so like my question would be, what is your creative process like? Like, how do you look at a croissant and decide to make it a bralette type thing?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. That was really kind of you. And I mean, I just love having fun. I really, like, it's so simple to say that, but like with work and with your job, like, it's so hard to just like lose that spirit. And I think the childhood wonder has kept me going. And I definitely use elements of nostalgia and use like toys and things that are fun and fun colors. And so that is kind of the start of the process sometimes, and it will sort of dictate projects. So I'll be like, oh, my mom dug up a bunch of my old Legos during COVID, and like she sent them to me. She was like, you're probably really bored. Like, here's a bunch of Legos. And I made a pair of shorts with them. It was insane, but it was more of just like a fun exploration. And I kind of feel like my younger self would be super happy to know that I was like still playing and still having a good time. But yeah, I mean, it's really, my work is definitely an extension of myself. It's my brain kind of exploded on my page, but it's not necessarily my style. Like, I don't wear my pieces. I'm not overly loud and extravagant in some way. And I think that's what's kind of cool about it, is like, it is an art form for me, and fashion is an art outlet. And it can sit somewhere between like a functional wearable piece, but also could be kind of silly as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that croissant bra too, because food is actually a part of my work as well. I use it as a medium, and I find that it's really interesting that it is quite a sustainable thing, because I can make an art piece out of it and then I can eat it after. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like really cool to be able to have a lunch and a project at the same time. But something I learned with working with food in particular is that I never wanted to disrupt the food in a way that I couldn't eat it. So that was a challenge in itself, was to be able to, I was making vests out of bread, and I was putting string and these like pulley systems all inside of it to keep the structure. And then afterwards being able to take out the wire and the thread and being able to eat it. So trying to find materials that are super non-traditional and to be able to like really maximize it as far as I can. Got some more questions. Thank you for your question.
If you want, you can go ahead and so that we don't overlap.
Oh, no, whoever wants to go next.
My question is, how do you kind of take inspiration from other designers without like ripping them off? Like how can we find our artistic style without ripping anybody off?
That's a good question. It's hard when you're starting, because you're going to be inspired by somebody, and probably many people. And so I think it takes a little while to get your own design style. And I think I love to see young designers who are starting to kind of find their way. And I do feel like my work sometimes gets referenced in that, and I think it's always like fun to see when people kind of like make something like one-to-one at first, but then down the line it starts to evolve into something that's like totally their own style. So I think don't be scared to feel like you're ripping somebody off at first, if that's more of what you're asking. Like if you're looking at people's work for reference, I think that's totally normal. But over time, like allow yourself and your personality to come through. Like that's their art expression and that's their personality, and I think that's a good starting place. But like ultimately, you should be shining through your work. Hi.
Okay, I'm much shorter than the microphone. So I know that you have quite a social media presence, and I was wondering, like, in your point of view, how important is that? Because I think like that's something that I've like debated whether I want to have like a personal Instagram mixed with my design work, or if I should just create another account, because we all know it's really difficult to maintain like things running.
Yeah.
So just how you were able to mend both, and like the importance that you think social media presence has in a designer's life.
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's really hard nowadays to like not have social media. I really envy the people that can like stay off the grid, but I think in a design industry, it's a portfolio. I mean, I still look at my Instagram as my portfolio page, and I didn't expect that to happen. Like when I was sharing my work, it was just like for fun, and I didn't have a following. It was just to like put out art, put out work. And then once it started to kind of get shared and take off a little bit, I was like, like, do I need to create like a whole separate identity for this? And I didn't, because I was like, that seems like a lot of work to be able to start running different channels and stuff. So I think it almost forced me to keep more of my personality into it. I think if I kept it more of like, this is like design, like I only post like brand projects on it, I think it's going to feel a lot more ad-y in a way. So I do feel like it is balanced where I can post the things that I still want to post. I mean, I enjoy posting my projects, but I try to incorporate my personal life into it where I can. But I mean, social media has been interesting for me because I don't think I'd have the opportunities in this capacity that I've had. I'd say it's been such a good tool to be able to connect with a larger audience, connect with other people in other countries that I don't know if I'd ever really be able to get that opportunity anywhere else. But with that, I really do try to take things offline as much as I possibly can, like coming and doing events and meeting people in the workshops. I think those are always really good opportunities for me to like be a real person and not just be like this secret person that's on the internet. And then now I have a Finsta account where I like post all like my personal stuff and my friends' birthdays and stuff, which is like I'm able to still like use social media for fun. But definitely there's a balance between it, because a lot of the time I feel like when you do get this weird social media following, you almost feel like you need to be able to be creating for them and not for yourself, because you're like, oh, they expect me to post something this week, and oh, maybe this won't do as well as it did the last time, and like that's such a scary mindset to think like that. Like that's not the reason why I started. So I always have to remind myself, like if I like it, then I'm going to share it, and hopefully people will resonate with it somehow. Yeah, thanks for your question.
Hi, Nicole. I'm Nori.
Hi.
It's so nice to hear you talk about your work. I find it really inspiring, and just your approach to design is so disruptive and like striking, and I think that's what we need to really tackle issues like climate change and climate justice. So thank you for being here today. I have two questions. My first is thinking about how like the business culture we're in, where it's so driven by efficiency and keeping the pipeline going. And I'm wondering what makes companies come to you and what makes them care about waste. And I wonder what kinds of brands you work with as well, like, because I would think that bigger brands have the flexibility and have the money to maybe break out of that culture and experiment with waste and reorienting waste. And I'm wondering about second-tier brands and companies and ones that maybe don't have as much of the means, what you think their role is and how they can start to think about waste. And then my second question is, in freelancing, I'm wondering, like, do you have people you consistently collaborate with, or a team, or have you been freelancing pretty independently since you started, and just how you navigate that, like depending on what it's like whether you're alone most of the time or collaborating, how you've come to embody your own work and yourself in that specific position?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go the second question first. And I might have you remind me what you said your first question. It's mostly just me making stuff. I do have a business manager now who helps me kind of keep things organized, kind of help me with, the invoices and the emails and that sort of stuff. And that's been really helpful for me as a creator to be able to be with somebody who is definitely a lot more of like this organized type of brain, where it's like, oh, let's make a to-do list, let's make a checklist, where I'm like, oh, well, just do whatever I'm feeling today. So I've been learning a lot more about how to keep myself organized. And then as well, I've had a couple younger designers coming in and helping me in my studio. That's been like the biggest goal of mine recently, is to get people in and like have my space as an opportunity for like learn how to sew, come use the materials, come use it as a workshop feel. So I've had some interns and some people that are just like in the area at the time being, coming in and kind of working in the space with me. I find that to be really inspiring, and hopefully they'll be able to take something out of it, but I do as well. Anytime I can work with somebody in collaboration, I feel like I learned so much from that experience. everyone has this imagination that they, for some reason, I feel like sometimes don't use in their day jobs. So just working with people that maybe necessarily like don't get to turn that part of their brain on when they start working in the studio or at a workshop, I start to see like the craziest ideas come to life, and that always informs me and influences me, and it's just, yeah, it's always really exciting. And then to your question about larger brands and why they come to me for advice, because they have the money, they have the tools, is more of that they don't have the authenticity, I guess. That's kind of like what I've realized, is that they could have all the money in the world, but they don't know how to talk about sustainability that feels genuine and that actually feels like they're gonna make a change and make a difference. So, I mean, I've always tried to be as real as I possibly can be with them, and be like, look, younger people are gonna see right through this, and so like you really have to be able to put your money where your mouth is for not just right now, but for a long, long time ahead of you. And something I've noticed, which is really weird, but especially with like the top tier brands, is that a lot of the time they are doing things internally that could be seen as sustainable, but they don't want to talk about it because then they feel like they're going to be held accountable. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, that's kind of a strange way of approaching it, because you're a giant company, and I don't think anyone's going to expect you to change like overnight, especially some of these brands that have been operating for 70 years, like, a Nike or an Adidas, or some of these brands have been around forever. And it's like, it would be unrealistic of us as consumers to be like, you need to just change everything right now. I mean, they have money, and I think they could be doing way more work. But I do feel like in order to make something that is long lasting and not something that's just like a complete marketing sham, it needs to be done right, and it needs to be done over time. And I don't have all the answers to that, and I mean, this isn't infrastructure of brands and sustainability isn't my background, but I am learning a lot more about it. I do come at it more of a design and creative approach, but I've been learning so much about this and trying to like create longevity with this. And then for younger brands that are starting, I always, it is hard to start a brand that like sustainable, because it's cheaper to print on a Gildan t-shirt. It is. And if there's opportunities to be able to find dead stock, find secondhand, and do your t-shirts that way, or being able to introduce the take back program like I was talking about before, where it's like you're automatically taking responsibility and being like, what, if something breaks that we sell to you, we'll take it back and we'll repair it for you. There's a lot of brands that are now implementing that. Think like a Patagonia, or even an Arc'teryx is doing that as well. So it creates more of a relationship. It's more of a connection between brand and consumer, and less of this like completely like separated thing. I hope that answered all of those. But cool.
I actually have a follow-up. Is that okay?
I mean, it's fine with me. Yeah, go for it.
A follow-up on my second question about freelancing. So, like, I can imagine it gets kind of lonely sometimes, just doing a lot of your work on your own. And something I'm thinking about after college is what kind of community I want to be a part of, and how many people I want to be interacting with in a workplace, or whether I want to be more independent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering how you deal with that independence.
Yeah, the question was about like, can it be lonely as a freelancer? And the independence is that, for me, I think it's been liberating in a way. I do feel like I can be an independent person, but at some point it does get lonely, and I do miss elements of working within a corporate office. I made a lot of good friends from that experience. I made a lot of friends with people that were willing to go to bat for me, and people that really defended me in certain scenarios. And sometimes it's kind of like, you realize like, oh, I have to do that all now for myself. So it is really that shift of being like, I have to be strong. I have to stand up for myself. And then also surrounding myself with other freelancers as well. I mean, I've made so many great friends with people within my industry that have done this for a lot longer, or on the same kind of path as I am. And we talk about it a lot. And we talk pay transparency. We talk about like, the brands that are coming to us and what they have to offer. And I mean, some people don't like to hear that, but I think it's important. I think it's valuable to know, what these projects are doing for not just the company, but for yourself. And I mean, I think it's been really eye-opening to have those conversations. But community is super important, especially after you go on and graduate. I mean, you guys are so fortunate to have, be surrounded by one another. And I miss those times in university where I had like a group of friends and people you could bounce ideas off of. So if you do decide to go freelance, like keep in connection with people, talk to people, meet other freelancers, go in a shared workspace. I know right now is like questionable with COVID, but like in the future, I think it's very valuable to be with other people, for sure.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
2 quick questions. So, I know you mentioned that like when you first started out, you weren't really thinking as an entrepreneur. Like you didn't really want to start your own business. Now that you kind of have that community and that support, would you reconsider and like maybe start your own brand in addition to freelancing? And then my second quick question, your work kind of borders like fashion and fine art. Do you think you would ever see yourself doing like sculpture or performance art in that sense, or do you think you'll kind of stick to fashion? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I like to do second question first. I kind of feel like it rides the line between art and fashion, and I think a lot of the time people are like, well, which one is it? You have to make the decision. And I'm like, well, why do I have to? Because I kind of feel like it can go both ways. But I do really see myself wanting to go larger scale with things, and I tend to kind of I'm starting to think a little bit more outside of the world of malleable materials. So I more traditionally work with, textiles and things like shoes and garments. But now I'm kind of starting to think about like the world of secondhand furniture and like runoff materials from different pop-ups. That's something that's really important in New York. It's like there's always an event, there's always something happening, and it's like, well, what about all the stuff that comes after that? And I'm like, maybe I could try to make something that's more sculptural, more larger scale, something that still can serve a purpose, that is made with some of these secondhand materials. So I can see it living more in an art space in the future. I would love to have more of a remote lifestyle where I can kind of just create and make stuff. That's sort of a dream in a way, but I like to keep it open. I don't want to go either way with that. Sorry, your first question was, would if I started things different from the beginning if I knew that this was going to be the end goal type thing? Yeah. Even if I knew this from the start, I don't think I ever would have started like a brand in any way. I think it kind of goes against everything I'm preaching. I like the fact that it is one-off. I like that it's one of a kind. And something that's really, I guess, interesting about my work that people don't really know is that the pieces that I make, I take them apart after. Like I consider the final piece to be the photo and the thing that people see through whatever, a book or social media. That's the final piece to me, because I will take that piece apart and I will upcycle it again and again and again. And so a lot of the projects that people have seen, chances are it was something else before, and I think it's given me this opportunity to be able to really see how much potential there is with this material. And challenge myself, and like also the feeling of letting go and being like, you know what, I spent a lot of time making this, but I'm kind of comfortable with taking it apart because I made it once before and I know I can make it again. So.
Hi Nicole, I'm Zekai and I do a little bit of scenery design for theaters. And speaking of scenery design, it is really an industry where not recycling used materials is a big issue. So I personally am quite interested in how you convince groups or organizations to really switch to this more sustainable mindset. So my question is, from your experience with working with those large firms, what would you think is their reason behind their initial interest in sustainability? And during your collaborations with them, do you often find yourself have to maybe communicate different visions for sustainability and stuff?
I feel like they usually are like interested in sustainability without knowing really what that means, I guess. And like when the conversation starts, they're always like, oh, you could just make something fun with this. And then it always ends up being something a lot more in depth because I tend to pry and try to figure out like what more we can do. To be honest, some of the initial conversations, I'm not gonna like point my finger at any brands, but like initial conversations might be more about like they just need some type, they're coming to me for Earth Day, like they're coming to me for like, you know, all the moments, it's like that are very typical of a brand to want to like have some type of moment. And so I will always be like, okay, well, what about not Earth Day? What about in like November? Like let's plan a little bit further out so it's not tied to something like that. And what else can we do with it? And I mean, I know I feel like I said it a couple times, but it really is about like showing them the potential. So what you're talking about with this material, that people might not see the value of it in the moment, and you just kind of have to show them like, this is like, you are not thinking far enough. You are only thinking about what this item is right now, and you're not really thinking about the potential about it in the future, and then what it can be after that. And designing for a future. So designing, like even if you're to design something from scratch, like what's going to be the life after that? Designing a pattern that it's a jacket, but if you took out a seam or something, maybe it becomes a vest, maybe it becomes a pant. And I know that's not, I'm going more in the terms of fashion just because that's where my brain goes, but you know what I mean? I think that could be applied in other ways. Did I answer that? I don't know. Okay, cool.
I think we'll have one last final question.
I think.
Yes.
Hello. How much of an emphasis do you put on learning a company's infrastructure, especially when it comes to making connections that could be more profitable and sustainable?
It's really important. I mean, I try to learn about the businesses as a whole, and this is where I do kind of wish I had some type of business degree in that way. We're just learning how a company runs and kind of all the different arms of it and how they interact with one another. You'd be surprised when you find out like some of these companies don't have as big of a design team as you might think. And I mean, I think it's important to understand like the people within the company and their goals as well. When I think about working with brands, I think about like every aspect, the things that people don't really even get to see. So thinking about the factories, that's really important to me as well, is understanding where things are made in the world. Who are they? Who's making them? And then also when it comes to sustainability, it's more about like how are things shipped from the factories? What's the packaging? Where is it being sent to? It's more of like learning the company from all the kind of the back ends to be able to figure out what to do in a forward-facing way, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering all our questions. It was really great having you here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.